Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Early Funding Intelligence workshop. I'm Claudia, I'm based in London, and I work in the global memberships team at Devex. I work with private sector implementers, NGOs, corporates, higher education institutions, institutional funders, foundations, and other actors really, and stakeholders in international development in my day-to-day. Their aim is to track funding, diversify their funding sources, forge new partnerships, and improve their knowledge of the development funding flows and overall development space. Today, we'll be delving into how to learn about opportunities earlier and how organizations can better the strategy and pre-positioning for opportunities by taking advantage of early stage funding intelligence. We'll be using the Devex funding platform and the Devex analysis to do so. I'll be sharing my screen to show examples of analysis and early stage information to hopefully illustrate and bring to life like how you can strengthen your funding and resource mobilization strategies. We'll start with an overview of how organizations use Pro Funding for Organizations and the funding platform. And then we'll move on to the subject at hand today, the types of early stage funding intelligence that organizations can use. I'll share my screen along the way and walk you through some examples. And the presentation will be around 25 minutes long, and then we'll leave some time for questions from you, from the audience. As questions do come up, please pop them in the Q&A box. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please use that same box, and my colleagues from our support team will be able to assist. Great, so let's get started. Right, so how do organizations use the Devex funding platform? To track and identify funding opportunities. At Devex, we aggregate tenders, grants, and other open opportunities from more than 850 funders. This includes bilaterals, multilaterals, foundations, corporates, and other perhaps more non-traditional and emerging donor sources. Organizations can track these sources in one place instead of having to go to millions of websites each day. They see this as a time-saving component to their day-to-day, and they can rely on Devex and on the alerts that they set on the platform to receive all relevant opportunities to them, and then are able to use that time to focus on other aspects of their roles. Another reason would be to partner. Partnering is obviously a key part of development funding. It's particularly important when looking to diversify your funding sources, and when you're looking to work with a funder or in a region you haven't worked in before. Members use the contract awards database to assess which organizations have won contracts with donors in specific regions in the past, and therefore are strongest to partner with on a certain proposal, but also to do some competitive analysis. To know their space. Now, it's important, obviously, of what tenders there are out there, what grants there are out there, but also to have a big picture view of what the donor priorities are, what those policy changes are that will ultimately and in the end impact funding. And then to save time, I think I've noticed this before, but it's one of the main reasons that organizations use the platform in our membership. They rely on us tracking their funding and delivering that information to their inboxes. So instead of visiting and refreshing those donor websites over and over again each day, teams can concentrate on other priorities. And then getting in at the right time. So this is obviously crucial. Organizations often tell us that they miss out on opportunities because they haven't heard about them, or they've heard about them a little too late when the deadline is, for instance, 2 weeks away, and there just isn't enough time to prepare for the proposal and find the right experts for it. So this is what we'll focus on in this session, and I'll be expanding on it later on. Just a quick note here on the number of funders that we track, that's 850. As well as the sources of our early stage information, which is over 600,000. Crucially, we have analysts and journalists working across the globe that have that ear on the ground and that report on any changes on funding policy, programmatic changes, and overall funding news. So you're aware of what's happening in the funding landscape. Right, so here you can see the Devex funding surge and the stages of the funding pipeline. Just wanted to share a quick overview on where we are and what we'll focus on today. And this is the funding activity database, which is the very first stage of the funding pipeline. You then have, the programs, tenders and grants, and finally the contract awards. Now, after this brief introduction to the platform and the tools we'll be using today, we just wanted to get to the matter at hand, which is the early stage funding information. And I wanted to start with the why. A lot of organizations I speak with on a daily basis have a huge focus on tracking, tenders, grants, and other opportunities that are already open. And while this is important, the work that comes before the stage is just as important, if not more. Early stage and advanced funding intelligence allows organizations to build a stronger strategy, better their prepositioning for opportunities, and ultimately it increases their chances of winning proposals and securing funding. It's a way to be ahead of that tender and grant being released, and it puts organizations in a much better position when that opportunity is finally open. It's also a helpful exercise to do when you're looking to diversify your funding sources. So for example, you might discover that a donor you hadn't considered before has just announced or launched a new initiative that aligns with your work. Now, this is information that is important for you to be aware of and to continue to track. Now, it's also important for anyone to know about donors' priorities, strategies, recent announcements, and whether you and your organization are a good fit as a partner. Importantly, and I'm sure, again, some participants today can relate to this, it's a way to avoid those last-minute opportunities that fall on one's desk where teams only have a week to piece a proposal together for. And now that we know the why, we'll get into the how, and I've split that into 4 different types of early stage information that will help your team. I'm going to start with the first type of early stage funding intelligence, and that's announcements of news found on the funding activity stage of the funding platform. In the last 3 years at Devex, we've focused heavily on this database, which brings together future funding news, such as announcements of new initiatives, new partnerships, pledges, just creations of new funding instruments. This would be quite tricky and difficult to track manually. At Devex, we compile this information using machine learning, as well as analytical expertise, to track over 600,000 sources of national and international media. This information can then be filtered by sector, by donor, by geography, and it makes it a huge difference for organizations to be better positioned, really. It's a great source to find those nuggets of information that will help you understand what a donor's priorities are and what funding might be to come. You can use this information as a tip to keep in mind, to start engaging with new donors early and to start conversations and relationships with funders at an earlier stage. We're going to go ahead now and look at this example that I picked out here. So this is a new funding proposal. It's the creation of a fund, 35 million initially, that's pounds, for support for Ukraine. And this was an announcement a few days ago about the UK, Canada, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United States planning to create this fund by the end of January this year. And that financing will be over 3 years. Now, how can you use this information? If you're working already with any of these funders, would be to contact them and just let them know that you've found out about this piece of news and this announcement that they've made, and essentially use that opportunity to network with them and understand what their goals are for this specific fund and how you can potentially align with them. Now we can use some filters to look at these news. So you'll see here that I've selected the news part of the funding activity, and you can enter regions or countries. So say you could enter, East Africa. You can enter a specific country. So say within East Africa, maybe I want to look at Kenya. I could do that. And I can also enter, a number of funders. Maybe what I want to do here, you'll see the different funder categories at the top. Maybe what I want to look at right now are, bilateral agencies. Within that, you will see we've got all of the bilateral agencies that exist, USAID, Nordics, so NORAD, CEDA, and the NIDA. You've got, USAID and many, many others, and COICA and JICA in Asia, and many, many others there. So maybe I want to apply that, and I want to learn about news and announcements of early stage information by those bilateral agencies. And what I can do here is I can take a look at this, for example, this example. This is a new funding approval specifically for Uganda, and it's a partnership between DFAT and a few UN agencies. You see the value here, but not much more information has been released yet. You have an example here of JICA as well. There's, a new grant being announced, but again, with because this has yet to be in the tender and grant stage, there's no information around, how to apply for that. A lot of the times there's no value yet for the opportunity. And here you have an example of a new agreement signed, for example, so a new partnership between a university and USAID. So this is the kind of intelligence you'd be able to find at this stage. Great. So we'll move on to the second type of information that you can use, and that would be country strategy documents. So they can be helpful in understanding what donor priorities and plans are longer term, and identify alignment with donors in specific geographic areas. They essentially lay out a funder's policies and objectives in country and sometimes regionally. A little tip here as well, these can be helpful also later on in the business development process. When you're piecing together a proposal for a specific opportunity, it's important to brush up on these country strategies and understand what the donor is looking for and what their objectives are in that country. And now we'll take a look at, again, another example that I picked out. This is from DG INPA, that was formerly DEFCO. It is the new instrument of the European Commission. And what you can see here is a specific, multi-annual strategy for Peru from 2021 to 2027. Again, you see the priority areas here, a summary, and this would help you, shape again your proposals if you are to work with DG INPA in Peru or in the region. We can take a look at, other examples here. I filtered by the EU system, but maybe we can, again, take a look at different examples. In this case, for BMZ, and that is, sort of worldwide. In this case, another one from BMZ and KFW. And this is specifically sustainable access to water supply and sanitation from 2017 to 2030. Again, another strategic document, in this case from the EBRD in Montenegro, and that's on economic development, energy, and infrastructure. And that goes from 2021 to 2026. You'll be able to see that these plans are usually longer term, and you see the priorities and outcomes from these funders. Great. We'll go back to the presentation now. And we're going to move on to the third part of the third type of information that we can find, and that would be forecast, funding, announcement, analysis. Now at Devex, we have a large team of experienced analysts and journalists that are based across the world. and that go beyond aggregating information and work on analyzing what's beneath that funding data. These kinds of pieces are hugely helpful for organizations when they're trying to understand future funding. And what we do by analyzing them and visualizing them is to make information that's difficult to discover more accessible. So instead of going through thousands and thousands of Excel sheets and PDFs, we analyze that information, visualize it through a tool. You can see a little example here on the right for you to easily explore. You can filter by country, by sector, and just quickly have a grasp of what's to come. This is important to organizations to know what funding has been allocated and what has yet to be. So some examples of this and funders that essentially that publish this type of information. That would be the World Bank project pipeline analysis, the monthly operational summary, USAID's business forecast or their quarterly business goal. IDB publishes this type of information, and so does AFDB, MCC as well, and other large funders that release this kind of information. Just a quick note here, it's important to know that not all organizations operate in this way and will not have this forecast or pipeline information up to date or even available publicly anyway. So we're not going to take a look at a couple of examples, and we start with USAID's business forecast or the quarterly business call, which you can see here. So you'll see my colleagues, they update this on a quarterly basis. They usually create an article with, some highlights of what's changed. It's a really nice summary. And then what you can do is delve deeper into the data, which is what we might want to do now. So you will see here, there are different ways to interact with this data. You can have, sort of a snapshot of worldwide on the business opportunities and trends by quarter. You can look at it from a regional perspective and also from a sectoral perspective. In this case, we're going to look at the main visualization. And what you'll be able to see here, those countries that are in, the brighter orange are the ones that have most in the pipeline. So maybe what we want to do is take a look at Ethiopia, in this case, being one of the ones that has most in the pipeline. And in this case, it's 703.9 million. So you can see here the sectorial split, and you can see that there are 8 awards for global health, and you can see the estimate cost for all of the projects in global health. That would be 253.9 million. Then you can see, there's one in WASH for 50 million, another one in education, a smaller one as well for democracy, human rights, and governance, and 3 awards for agriculture and food security. Totaling 250 million. So maybe what I want to do is take a look at global health. You can see some primary healthcare interventions here, private health sector support, and community engagement and other types of nutrition related activities as well that are there in the pipeline, and you can see the value there. So now we can take a look at another example of this kind of pipeline, a similar one, but this would be for the IDB. So what you've got here is the monthly operational summary of the IDB. Again, there's usually an article that explains, in this case, how to read the monthly operational summary and what those stages of the project look like. And what you can see here is how to explore it on Devex. So you can both explore it in the funding in the funding search, so through the funding activity feed, or you can go directly to the visualization and interact with it. Similarly, here, what you can do is filter by sector, filter by country, and also look at the overall projects and then find out more information about it. And you've got here a summary of some of the pipelines. I wanted to go now to another kind of pipeline. So what you've got here is the commercial pipeline for the FCVO in the UK. The last time this was updated was December last year. It's not updated in a monthly basis usually. It is a little bit different than how it works with USAID or with the World Bank and the IDB, the different development banks. So here you've got a nice summary of 49 opportunities in the program. And here, the value of the opportunities, where the money is going. Again, a brief analysis from our brilliant analysts that make it all much easier to digest. Great. So now we're gonna move on to the fourth type of early stage information that you should be aware of, and that is, the analysis, the news, and the events that you can find on Devex. It's important to get a bird's eye view of what's happening in the sector. Important to identify relevant governance and policy changes within major institutions, and it provides that daily coverage and analysis to stay up to date. Some examples I've put on here on, an announcement around the 17 billion next gen contracts from USAIDs. That was a few weeks ago. A deep dive into the changes in governance at the Gates Foundation. These are surely going to affect funding down the line, and it's important to keep informed on those fronts. At the very bottom, you'll see examples as well of events related to funding that, again, can help you inform your strategy. Some of them, the Mackenzie-Scott effect, and new types of philanthropy, the ins and outs of cryptocurrency fundraising. You can see, as well, one that can and should aid be used to tackle the root causes of migration. So there are a lot of examples here of information that you can use in shaping that funding strategy. And now, where you can find most of this information is under here, under funding overview. This is where you're going to be able to find the Devex analysis around funding. It's under here under funding insights. It's also where you'll find those pipelines that I was mentioning before. You will find here webinars that are related, again, to funding, so watch it inside USAID's new local funding plan, or what's next for global health financing trends. All of this can help you piece together that strategy. Some articles on how to win funding, more practical articles, and then just that focus on policy and on those specific funders, on philanthropy as well, innovative finance, and here a bit more on procurement, development policy. All of this will be relevant, again, in being a little bit ahead of that tender and grant opportunity and being better positioned. Great, so I'm going to leave it here in terms of presenting and move on to whether there are any questions from participants now, feedback. Okay, I can see a few here. All right, so one of the questions is, does Devex do any further analysis on this early stage information? And yes, we do occasionally. An example of this is the article my colleagues put together on USAID's CDCs, or country development cooperation strategies, which usually serve as the blueprint for project and activity implementation in each of the countries USAID works in. They also are, I know that they're also currently working on the World Bank's monthly operational summary of all of 2021. So doing an analysis on that. And we do look for opportunities there to create additional content and value in this kind of early stage information. Let me see if there are any other questions. Right, I've got another one here. Can you find out funding news and announcements from trusts and foundations as well, or is it only for institutional donors? Right, so I might go back to my screen here and show you an example. So we're going to go back to the funding search, and you'll be able to see here that you can indeed look at funding activity for foundations. So you can enter a specific foundation, but if you just wanted to look at it more broadly, here are the foundations that we cover. You could select all of the foundations and corporations that we cover, apply that, and you're going to find, again, new partnerships. You're going to see quite a bit of pledges there, announcements of new initiatives. All of this will be, I'm sure, relevant. Here there is another partnership specifically for Rwanda, corporate partnership in this instance. Loan approval. You've got quite a bit here and around partnerships. So this is on more in the innovative finance side of things. And here an announcement of another private partnership. All to say that yes, you can also find out this type of information from foundations. And it can indeed be a great tool to see if there's alignment with a specific foundation, use that information to engage and contact the foundation. Just a quick note, it's important to know that it will be the larger, higher compliance trusts and foundations that will be the most active in this space. And then let's move on to another question. Do you track the Asian Development Bank's country operations business plan? So the COBP, we unfortunately no longer track, and that's because it was discontinued this July 2021. It was replaced with the indicative country pipeline and monitoring report. And as far as we know, they are not disclosed to the public as of today. We do have some entries though from just former COBPs that are covering the period from 2021 to 2023, which might still be useful if you're looking into this kind of information before that gets replaced with something else. So there are some more questions, and I don't know that we have the time to go through them. For the ones we haven't have time to get to, I'll make sure to connect with you directly and respond to each question individually. If you're interested in learning more or signing up to Devex funding for organizations, please do feel free to get in touch with me as well. And thank you for your time today. Hopefully this workshop was useful to you and the team, and have a great day ahead.